It was like such a happy moment because I met my daughter like anyone else would meet their daughter, and so much sadness at the same time. There is something about having to give birth to a child you know you will never get to take home while you are simultaneously listening to other women give birth to children that are screaming and healthy that will never leave me. So I was born in Mount Isa. My sisters were born preemie at 24 weeks. And when that happened, we moved up to Hervey Bay to be closer to my grandparents so that my mum and dad had support with 3 kids at the time. So my mum had triplets that were born at 24 weeks, and sadly my sister Louise passed away. But yeah, growing up we loved being in Hervey Bay. We were always at my grandparents' place. Career evolved. I went for a admin traineeship at Fraser Coast, or Tourism Fraser Coast at the time. Got that and started sort of in the world of tourism, which I loved, and an opportunity came up for me to basically move into a marketing role there, which is where my marketing career began.
So Steph and I met about 7 years ago at a pre-whale season function, sort of a networking event. Met each other there, got talking, and then one thing led to another.
He was there, he'd just moved back because he'd found out his dad was unwell, and I'd also just found out that my mum had been going through breast cancer as well, so we kind of had that common ground, and he bought me a drink and the rest is history, really.
So we got married. I'm not very good with dates, but we got married about 4 years after we met. We proposed to Steph down at Santini's on the beach there.
It was hot and he was wearing this big black jacket to dinner because he was trying to hide the ring in the box in his jacket.
And then about a year or so later, we had COVID, so that sort of threw a spanner in the works, and then we got married on the beach out at Point Vernon. It was a beautiful day down there, so overlooking the water. We both loved the water a fair bit, so then we had our wedding reception down at Enzo's, which is really nice on the beach there as well.
We'd always sort of discussed that we would want children eventually, and then as soon as we were married we sort of went on a honeymoon and came back, and we just discussed that we were ready to start trying for children. I think within 2 months I was pregnant. It was a bit of a shock at the time, but we were so happy, so excited. I was a little bit anxious because I'd had friends that had been honest with me about when they had early term miscarriages, but once we sort of got to the 12-week mark I was sort of feeling optimistic until we went for our first scan, and then sort of everything went downhill from there. And that night I got a call from my GP, and I kind of knew that started this real thing for me, that I was so anxious when my phone rang because it was always bad news. At that point we didn't know what it was, so we were still trying to maintain optimism, but I had always from that moment had a gut feeling that things weren't going to go well. I had months and months of just anxiousness and waiting and tests, and we would drive back and forth to Brisbane to maternal fetal medicine.
It wasn't until about 18, 19 weeks that they sort of found a slight abnormality, and they said nothing really too much to worry about. And then it was sort of a waiting game from there, and then we got to, I think it was 21 weeks, and they said, oh, this isn't looking so good. And then it wasn't until 24 weeks they confirmed that it wasn't very good at all, and then unfortunately we lost the baby at 26 weeks.
Life definitely was never the same after that moment. A few weeks later I gave birth to Olive, our daughter. It was like such a happy moment because I met my daughter like anyone else would meet their daughter, and so much sadness at the same time, this real duality of feeling happiness and sadness at the same time. There is something about having to give birth to a child you know you will never get to take home while you are simultaneously listening to other women give birth to children that are screaming and healthy that will never leave me.
I couldn't believe that it was happening again, and especially to Steph with what we've been through, and her as a young child having to come to terms with that and even understand, to get the phone call that she was going through the same thing. I still can't find the words to say how absolutely horrible it was, and even just now thinking of trying to talk about it You want to do everything you can. We wanted to do, and I wanted to do everything humanly possible and even impossible to make it that she didn't have to go through all that. But of course, there's nothing you can do.
I felt like I was not in my body. I was just a bit numb to it all and very clinical about it until I sort of went home, and that's when my mental health really took a toll and my grief really took over. That's probably my worst moment. You know, I had her there and we were lucky to have what they call a cold cot, so we got to have time with her as a family. But a few days later, I had to leave the hospital, so I had to walk out and leave her there, and I had to be wheeled out. And I always said it was just such an awful thing that I walked out with this memory box on my lap instead of my baby, just having everyone look at me as, you know, I'm wheeled out through the maternity ward. And, you know, you're also surrounded by, you know, women who've just had babies or they're going in to have their baby, and it's such a happy story for them, but it's so difficult when you're the one that you don't get that. And yeah, that feeling will never leave me. I really went into a stage where I couldn't, like, I just wasn't there in my body. I couldn't work. I'd completely sort of stepped back from our businesses. Scott had to take on a lot more work to allow me to do that. The only thing that I did was my work for Fraser Coast Mates. It really just got me out of bed because I felt like I needed to help other people. That's how I wanted to move forward. Yeah. I didn't want to go through anything again, but I couldn't fathom that, like, this was the end of the story, that there was nothing else, that we would never have another child. And we knew that because there was genetic reasons that Olive wasn't healthy, we would have to go down the route of IVF. I didn't want to have to go through it again, but we had held our child and we knew what it was like, and we both agreed that, you know, we would do whatever we could to have another child. A little while after, but that process took a long time to sort of get off the ground. And that really remained sort of a driving force for many years. We just needed to feel like we could do something about it. Yeah, the process of IVF is really downplayed. I feel like it's very taxing on both parties. You're getting injections multiple times a day. Your hormones are going up and down. You're then going in for scans to see, is it working so far? Is it not working? And it's the real highs and lows of, you know, you get eggs collected, you've got 15, oh, now you've only got 2. You have to go into it with a sense of hope or you wouldn't get through it. But then that hope sort of diminishes and it becomes a real low. If you decide to go again, you just have to sort of, I guess, push through and try and have a little bit of hope again. But after multiple times, that certainly wanes. It becomes harder and harder to go through each time. The waiting was sort of looked like you'd wait to find out how many eggs you got. For us, they had to be genetically tested. So we would wait 2 weeks to find out, are these embryos usable or are they not? And then if you're lucky to get that far, you then have to implant the embryo. And so we got to that stage, I think 3 times. An embryo was implanted, you then wait another 2 weeks to find out if you're pregnant. And while this is happening, you're trying to, you know, do your everyday life, run businesses, do whatever you do, go to work, which is quite difficult. Everything else, everything in your body is telling you, well, every other time, it's been bad news. It's going to be bad news. Like, it's just a matter of when. And we did get to the point where I was, certainly Olive's birth and everything that happened was my lowest of lows. But by the time I had gone through that, plus 3 or 4 failed embryo transfers with the whole IVF, I was to my absolute breaking point physically, mentally. Scott and I had said, if this time doesn't work, you know, I don't know how long we can go. And I went through a real grieving stage of, I may never have a living child, and how do I come to terms with that? What do I do with that? But on the last time it worked. We've had a natural pregnancy and an IVF pregnancy, and it's very different in IVF. It's not like, we're having a baby. It's looking good today, and then you get another phone call. It took a long time for me to be excited, let myself be happy and excited that this was happening. The second time around, it's just different because I can't unknow what I now know can happen. Like can't go in this with rose-coloured glasses that I have hope that everything's going to be okay, because we're such a rare case in Olive's pregnancy that, you could have said to me, yeah, 90% chance everything will be okay, but we were that 5%. So I never really sort of let my guard down in that sense. Halfway through the pregnancy, become more comfortable talking to people, letting people know that I was pregnant. I was mostly okay except for the weeks leading up to and after a scan, because that was that real traumatic thing for me where I was going back into the exact same places that I was told the worst news of my life and having to sort of really push through it. That caused a lot of anxiety for me. I still, even if I went to a hospital for something else completely unrelated, it still really takes me back to those times. Anxious, scared. I don't like being in hospitals because of it. And that's what I found difficult, both with IVF and the other pregnancies. I kind of just had to push through these really traumatic, triggering things because I needed to have my baby. So day of giving birth, we elected to have a cesarean section so that I didn't have to sort of relive what I went through before. That was a decision that we both were happy with. So it was very, very polar opposite, which is what I wanted. We got up that morning and said, okay, we're going to have our baby now. Went to hospital. They had mentioned that our son might have issues with his lungs because he was being born a few weeks early, but he came out screaming to the rooftops. And when you've given birth to stillness, that scream is no words.
Beyond belief, the feeling that just to see him in Steph's arms and see Scott there beside them and to see how much Steph and Scott have grown with Remy as a family, you couldn't write about it, His arrival and the beautiful little being that he is. What he's done for all of us, including Steph's younger sisters, it's new family vibe. It's like the trees have flowered, and hard to explain, but
I've definitely learnt that putting my mental health as my number one priority is a non-negotiable. And if I don't, I just noticed that things go downhill. Very early on, as soon as I knew I had issues with Olive's pregnancy, I sought out a telehealth psychologist, and she was instrumental in my growth and my healing through this whole journey, and I still see her today. I found the telehealth option really removed a barrier of, even when I couldn't get out of the house, I couldn't fathom even getting out of the house, I could still have that. Other than that, I would sort of walk on the beach each morning and meditate some days. Our family and our close friends really, really were our saving grace for a lot of this time. And they really showed up for us when we needed them. So definitely our village and sort of being able to communicate. And of course, Scott, he was really my foundation and my rock through this whole journey. And it certainly, I could see how this could make or break a marriage. And we're just lucky that really strengthened our bond.
I think the most difficult thing for me was just that waiting game, just not knowing every single step of the way from, right from starting the IVF journey until he was sort of born to now even, was knowing what's going to happen. Is everything going to be okay? Sometimes it was hard, but we got through it. We stuck together.
We needed to be there. You can't, because you don't know what to say or do, you can't walk away. You've got to be there and sit and listen. Put an arm around them. Leave a bag full of meals at the front door. Even if they don't eat them, at least they know somebody's worried about them, somebody's caring about them enough to... Don't pretend it didn't happen.
I will never move on from Olive, but it is nice to put the whole IVF chapter behind us and really just lean into being with Remy and the joy that he brings. It's certainly not all sunshine and roses, but he just brings so much light and happiness to what has been a pretty dark few years. I always think about how we'll explain to Remy about Olive, and it's really important to me that she'll always be a part of our family and that he knows that. And then I also think about how we'll explain to him like the lengths that like he's truly loved and wanted, like the lengths that we went through to have him. But yeah, I always wonder about how that will play out. You know, we have lots of things around our home that, you know, represent what Olive means to us, and I'm sure the same will be when Remy is to an age that we can talk to him about it and remember her as a family.